Remember, this show is PG-13, so you might hear a naughty word or two. This month, TumbleTrack is having a sale. TumbleTrack's home holiday sale is on. Everything and anything you can think of that you need to train happily and healthy and have fun at home is on sale. The training equipment, the home equipment, or fitness stuff, bars, mats, beams, air floors, those little hotspot things like the little tiny air floor circles you can jump around on, you can get all that and have it at home. And there's a sale. Visit TumbleTrack at TUMBLTRAK, tumbletrack.com. Train smart.
Today, our terrible commentator Hall of Shame. Trautwig, Monica Phelps, that SEC guy, Dick Enberg. Our rules for commentating, how to do it correctly. It's gymnastics commentators, the good, the bad, and the ugly, mostly ugly, a commission. And welcome to the #1 gymnastics podcast in the galaxy. I'm Jessica, and I'm here with Spencer from the Balance Beam Situation. And there will be profanity in this episode.
Oh, will there?
So I'd like to reiterate, I've had a lot of coffee. I'm very passionate about smashing the patriarchy, so I'm going to talk about that a lot. Yeah.
This is one of our all-time most popular episodes. It was originally recorded in 2020. Stay tuned for the very end of the episode where I will give you updates on two people that we, one, casually mention and make a joke about, and one that we talk about for a long time in this episode. You don't want to miss those.
So, Spencer, tell us a little bit about this commission.
This episode was commissioned by Anna Marie, who asked for an episode all about gymnastics commentators, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And like Jessica mentioned, we mostly fawn over Olly and Kathy Johnson the whole time. And like, the people we like are good, you guys. But yeah, so this is going to be really fun. We came up with some do's in addition to many, many don'ts.
We're very proud of ourselves, you guys.
Yeah.
So proud of ourselves.
A moment of positivity.
And I would just like to, first of all, thank Anne-Marie for this commission. Club Gym Nerd members like Anne-Marie are the people who help us pay our bills, deliver our weekly podcast, do live shows when we can do that again, do our in-person meet coverage, travel to Japan next year for the Olympics, go to a national team camps like we did in January. All of that is paid for by Club Gym Nerd members and our sponsors. So if you'd like to become a Club Gym Nerd member like Anne-Marie did, a discount if you sign up for the year, it's gymcastic.com under the Club Gym Nerd tab. You can join there, and there's tiers all the way up to intergalactic champion like Anne-Marie, and make us talk about anything you want us to, as long as it's tangentially gymnastics related. I'm waiting for the super tangential one.
Yeah, get as tangential as possible. This is not a making us talk about situation. This is like we specifically were like, someone commissioned this.
And someone did.
Basically what I do just as a pastime anyway. So, it's my favorite subject. So to start us off, our horrible commentary, Hall of Fame. We're going to, I just want to mention the So Little Talent moment at the beginning, because it is Elfi's So Little Talent moment is the all-time terrible commentary Hall of Fame. We did just talk about that in detail when we did our 2003 World Team Final commission. And there's a whole world of terrible comments beyond that. So we're going to get into the many, many, many of those. And as we said right before we started recording, we're probably going to already need to do a part 2, because there are just so many things.
So many, you guys. I mean, I couldn't stop doing the research on this, like up until the minute we started, because I was like, oh my God, what about this? This is bad. This is bad. This is bad. And all you need to know about the So Little Talent is that Elfi Schlegel said that about a gymnast as she stuck a full in. So that was mean. And that's why everyone should be more like Kathy Johnson and Olly Hogben. So shall we start our terrible commentary Hall of Shame? I'm calling it the Hall of Shame. I really like Hall of Shame.
I know. You do like shame.
It's one of my favorites. Brene Brown would be so upset with me. So
we'll start with topic number 1, which shouldn't need to be said, but apparently it does. First category, inappropriate sexual comments about minors.
You think we didn't even say that, but
I think that would be a given, but apparently not. Like that time Dick Enberg said, a very attractive 16-year-old Dirta Tumler. So here's the thing. If the words very attractive 16-year-old come into your head, they need to stop there and not come out of your mouth place.
He also said, thanks to Tia on Twitter for reminding us of this, he also said, Boganskaya, let's not forget this very attractive 15-year-old Soviet.
Yeah, he was really into talking about how attractive teenagers were.
Yeah, it's super gross and disgusting. And I was watching that and I was imagining it was like in the 50s. No, this was the 80s when he was saying stuff like this. I mean, yeah. It's horrifying, and it's horrifying that even this was well after the women's movement in the 80s, and he wasn't fired for saying those things, because it was like, anyway. We've come so far. We've come so far.
I mean, not that far, because some of the things we're going to talk about were like yesterday.
Yes, exactly. And I would just go ahead.
I feel like you probably would get fired for saying that now, which is better. It's better. What were you going to say?
I'll get to that later. So Tim Daggett famously said this about Lori Hernandez.
When she was the junior national champion, and they showed her amazing floor performance.
And he said, and to all the dads out there, see, she's 13 and dances like that.
Yeah.
No.
The implication there, I think, is that like dads are supposed to be horrified that she's so young,
and that she can dance.
Dances like that, which is, you mean she can dance? Like she's a good dancer and performed a compelling floor routine? Because that's what I saw happen there.
Right. There was no, and it was sexualizing.
Which was so weird.
And her dance, which I just feel like, first of all, shut up, and second of all, like there was nothing remotely. It was somehow, I feel like, implied she's Latin, so what she's doing is Latin, and so therefore there is a sexual component to it, which is also, I feel like, tinged with racism in the way that this was communicated. So don't do that.
Don't do that. That's another bad one. There's also something, and I couldn't remember it exactly, and I couldn't find it, and I was really annoyed by it, but it is like a vague, emblazoned memory of Al Trautwig talking about Nastia, and there was something, I think she was like warming up or stretching on the sidelines, and of course they were showing that instead of a routine, and it was something about like, and look at the way she can stretch her body. It was just like, it was a tone, and it was creepy, and that's not an exact quote because I couldn't find it, but there was something like that.
Is it any wonder that Al Trautwig, as soon as Nastia, or soon after Nastia started, was no longer a commentator in gymnastics? I'm not saying that Nastia had anything to do with that, but I
hope she did.
I hope she did.
That would be my favorite thing. That would rank right above her Pac Rims beam routine that she got like a 9.8 execution score for on the greatest thing that Nastia has ever done, if that were true.
It's probably like a combination of his horrible comments about Simone's parents that we'll get to, and like the culmination of years of just hating gymnastics and
it's everything he's ever done.
Right. And I would like to give Simone and Nastia credit for him not being around anymore doing commentary. The other thing is that he had a thing about Nastia. Like, he would make these gross comments about her, and then he would also constantly talk about how old she was. And this is 2008. This was not a crazy, insane thing to have adults on Olympic teams. And he would say, I think when she was 19, he was talking about how old she was and how hard it was going to be. And she was so injured, and could she do it? And anyway, then he also called her a grouch because she didn't smile when she competed. She never smiles. Another sexist, disgusting, and inappropriate thing to say about women. But back to the disgusting sexualizing comments. Subcategory 2 is sexual comments about adults, because let's not make sexual comments about anybody during sport.
Sexual comments don't have to be about minors. They can also be about adults, and they're terrible.
So Barry Brooker, who was on the SEC network, and during a male sports ball game, they did a gymnastics promo for Friday Night Heights, and he said, "Yeah, I want to go see some scantily clad girls." his co-host was appropriately horrified and made a point of saying that was not him that said that, and he did not endorse what his co-host had said. But he took a lot of crap for that, and he didn't get fired. As far as I know, he's still working there. So that's something that you shouldn't say. Scantily clad. No. About gymnasts, about anyone in sports. And then the subcategory of this, let's discuss.
Another subcategory. We have many.
So many. Infantilizing adults.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Most famously, we can't do this episode without bringing up Little Girls Dancing for Gold, with shots of like Shannon Miller and Amanda Borden and Dominique Dawes. 5 of the 7, like lest we forget, 5 of the 7 members of the Mag 7 were over 18, and none of them were little girls. It was weird.
I have heard that there was at least one gymnast on an Olympic team who refused to work with NBC because of the commentary of Trautwig, because of the framing of her gymnastics specifically, and had conditions. I encourage gymnasts to do that. You don't have to do. I mean, I think it is in your contract in some way that you talk to the media, but your talking to the media can be like, yes, no, I don't like how you talk about me, Al Trautwig, or whoever it is. Like, that can be your comments. It could be to us, like, hey, I don't like it when you guys do this. Like, if we want to change the culture, it helps that gymnasts aren't afraid to speak up and tell people, this is what's nice, this is what's not nice. I don't like it when you say that. Or just be like, I'm only going to give interviews to my own personal documentary team and not to NBC at all. Sorry.
Oopsies.
Or I'll talk to this. You hire this person for NBC and I'll talk to them. Done. Okay, so we need to do an entire chapter.
Let's not talk to Monica Phelps. No, thank you.
Oh my God, let's never talk to her. Can I just say that an earlier version of me, I mean, I'm still going to tear Monica Phelps up, but an earlier version of me would have just hated her. And now I actually feel sorry for her, because I feel like Monica Phelps, let's introduce her for a second. And I'll tell you about but I'll get into why I actually have like some compassion and feel sorry for her as a human.
So Monica Phelps she's long since not been a commentator anymore, but she was a commentator primarily on Eurosport for gymnastics around the late 90s and early 2000s era. We often get emails like, hey, you guys, you talk about bad commentators all the time, which, like, first of all, thank you. It is my passion. But I recently just heard the worst British lady. Who is she? And the answer every single time is Monica Phelps. You are thinking of Monica Phelps. It's Monica Phelps. So she was a gymnast herself. She was an Olympic gymnast for Great Britain at the 1964 Olympics. She finished 77th in the all-around. And there are several photos in various Olympic reports that are extremely unflattering of her not hitting dance element positions, which the Gymternet, and by Gymternet I mean also me, has saved for posterity, because turnabout is fair play, Monica Phelps. Oops.
That's right.
But yes, she was a commentator who was cartoonishly mean and loved to focus on every single comment was about weight and size, or just like saying people were very poor. Everything was very poor. But mostly everyone was hefty and chunky.
Like, I don't even know people who talked like this. Like, I don't know people who actually talk like this, like, in person as humans, let alone on TV.
We are gym nerds. And that's like, not the nicest group when you get together and talk about things.
A little snarky. We're a little snarky, but still. Right. Like, her favorite thing was to talk about chunky thighs. And I am just like, do you mean, she said about Protonova. She said Protonova had chunky thighs. Yeah, you guys thought we were going to get through a podcast without me talking about Protonova. She said Protonova had chunky thighs. And I was like, Monica Phelps, I will fight you in the alley right now. How dare you stick those words back in your mouth and swallow them down and never utter them again? Do you mean muscles? Are you jealous of the muscles that she has? Because that's the only excuse for how you were referring to her perfect muscular legs that allow her to do passes that were very, very uncommon in gymnastics. So shut it.
She also very famously had a routine, Tatiana Lysenko, 1994. So here's my question. I was going to ask you this before, but like, why not? Transparency. Should we like say the name of the athletes that were in the commentary, or should it be like about a gymnast? Because then it kind of feels like we're reasserting the same thing, which we've been doing already, but
I know. I kind of feel like we shouldn't.
Like the mean thing, like now, this person says something mean about her and we're going to like say it again, kind of.
Yeah, let's not say who the gymnasts were.
All right. Well, I already said this one, but now I've recognized that maybe wasn't the best thing to do.
And I said Bogunskaya too, so I will. Yeah. But
just, it's something. I mean, we are not saying these things like as presenting our own opinions, but it's that kind of thing where Monica Phelps would be like, now everyone watching is probably thinking this is a hefty girl. And it's like literally no one has ever thought that.
ever.
She also speculated about what size jeans the gymnast wore, which is like, don't do that.
She also said,
I don't care if you mean it as a compliment or a criticism. It doesn't matter. Just like, don't guess.
Don't say that.
Or if don't talk about it.
She said she's a very shapely young lady. So hard to judge the size of these gymnasts on television.
That's what we're
doing. Who was judging that? What? She's quite slender. And then she called her Yurchenko.
Yeah, she said
with the wrong gymnast name.
And quite slender in the same routine, which was interesting.
Oh my God.
But yeah, it was always like this size of gymnast. She liked to categorize and be like, this size of gymnast. This gymnast is not as finely built as some of the others, which is creepy. Mean and also creepy.
And creepy. And she had this obsession of if she thought someone was the right appropriate size for a gymnast, she wanted to make sure that the audience also understood that. So she would like tell you might be thinking that she's very chunky, but I want to assure you that you only think that because so-and-so is only 4 feet tall and so-and-so is, and we're like, no one is looking at an elite gymnast thinking that doesn't, no.
Yeah, the weird thing about her commentary is she was also obsessed. Like, she would also criticize people for being like, she thought they were too thin. Like, her favorite was prepubescent stick insect. That was a pet phrase.
Constantly.
And it was like, she was also criticizing like, well, we're not looking for the prepubescent stick insect. But then she also like everyone was also hefty or chunky. Right. So it was like, what are you about here?
I want to thank Jane for sending this in because she had a commentator. It wasn't just her. It was whoever was commentating with her during this period, the Dark Ages, when she was doing her commentary. This guy said during the 86 Kraft Cup was talking about this gymnast coach and his comments about the gymnast. And this is during her beam routine. This is what this guy says. She's just come back from 4 weeks of training with the Russians. They are usually great disciplinarians on the weight, but he's a bit annoyed. She's come back overweight. This was 86. Like, wasn't that the height of understanding about eating disorders?
That was not the height of understanding about eating disorders. We haven't met the height of understanding about eating disorders yet. Hopefully, we're not. That's TBD.
True. That's true.
But yeah, and like this isn't even in our like weight shaming chapter here. We haven't even talked about Christy Phillips in 1988 Olympic trials. Probably the worst obsession over someone's. I did the name again, but we talked about it before. The worst obsession over someone's weight, eating, diet, whether they're fit or not. It was creepy.
I also want to, while we close out this chapter, I do want to just give a phone number because we are talking about this. So if this is triggering something in you, if you need help around this issue, if you've ever been a victim of Monica Phelps commentary, there's a number to call. This is the National Eating Disorder Helpline. It's 800-931-2237. And I also just encourage you to lash out at the commentators who are doing this and shame them because it's not okay and it's so wrong. And I think it's better now, but it's like this implied undertone.
It's much less overt now, but there's a euphemism for everything, which is usually international look.
Yes. That is 100%. Or good lines.
Exact same things we're calling out here from these broadcasts in the 80s and 90s, but it's just like, yeah, right. It's lines. It's, she has the flexibility, even if she doesn't. Even if it's like, are she showing that to you right now? Or you just want to be like stylish, artistic?
Right. Yeah. It's
the look the judges are looking for.
So I just want to talk about why I've sort of like, I can't stand Monica Phelps and she is that horrible British lady, but also, I just feel like one of the problems that a lot of the commentators have is that they have internalized the patriarchy. So I just feel like Monica Phelps was one of those people who internalized that and what was codified in the original code of points from the FIG and like the 64 or whatever the first one was. Uncle Tim has all of this up on Uncle Tim Talks Men's Gym, and he went through all the codes as did Spencer on the balance beam situation. But I was looking back at that, and like the original code, there's no mention of artistry. They talk about feminine elegance. Feminine elegance available now at Macy's. Feminine elegance. By Paris Hilton. So Monica Phelps, I think, is, she internalized this idea of like women are only worthy if they ascribe to that European Victorian era idea of beauty, and that women are only worthwhile if they are, what their looks are the only thing that give them value, and their attractiveness to a man and ability to get a husband are the only things that give them value. And I feel like I've studied this as I watch all of the Victorian era British BBC shows. So I'm very familiar with this. And you can see it in how she talks. And I think if anyone's ever watched Mrs. Maisel, which is a hilarious TV show about a woman in the 50s, early 60s in New York City. And she goes through this morning routine, which is shocking, which is that she like gets up, she puts on her makeup before her husband gets out of bed, so he'll never see her without makeup and think that's actually what she looks like. Then she makes, she has like a maid who makes breakfast, obviously. And then, she puts on her heels and her outfit. And then after her husband goes to work, then she stays home and measures all of her body parts. And then she does her exercise class, and then she has her grapefruit and does the grapefruit diet. And she does this like every day. Like everything is just about, like, she goes to sleep with her makeup on, and then when her husband's asleep, she gets up, goes in the bathroom, washes her whole face, and gets back into bed, and then gets up again and puts her makeup on before he wakes up so he won't know. Like, I imagine that she self-flagellates, that is Monica Phelps, like if she were to gain a pound or feel like she didn't look like the Victorian ideal of a woman, like the amount of like hatred, self-hatred you have to have for yourself as a person to criticize other women like this is a special kind of misery. And yeah, it really, and I think this is why like so many people who talk about trying to change the culture, and I think this is something that Dave Tilley that talks about, this is something that Nick Ruddock talks about a lot, is you have to do the work on yourself. So you have to look at yourself and be like, what are my ideals? What are my biases? Like I have a muscle bias. Like if you're a muscular gymnast, I'm already like, you're perfect. You're great. Look at you. Oh, you look like Protonova. You're amazing. I recognize this about myself. It's something I'm working on. But like you have to know those things before you open your mouth and like fess up to them. And I also just want to say, like, obviously we are total hypocrites because we've probably done, except for the sexualizing minors, Jesus Christ, we've over the years are guilty of these things, and hopefully we have, so I just want to acknowledge that obviously we're not perfect, especially in the early days with men's gymnastics.
Do you love GymCastic? Do you want to see us do the podcast live, either in person or with a virtual ticket? Do you want to hear stories that'll never be told in public? Then come see us in Portland, Oregon, or get a virtual ticket to our live show in Portland, Oregon, Monday, December 9th at 6:30 p.m. at Show Bar in Revolution Hall with a very badass Olympian guest. Can't make it in person? Not a problem. You can watch later, even up to 2 weeks after the show. And if you can make it live, the virtual audience can interact with each other, chat with each other, and even ask questions to our guest live with a virtual ticket, just like the in-person audience. Tickets are on sale now at gymcastic.com.
So, yeah, I just want to bring up one more example of the kind of sexist comments that go on. Mm-hmm. And that is Peter Vidmar, who was Olympic gold medalist and also used to be the CEO of, or chair of boards of directors of chairs of USA Gymnastics. And he, during the scandal, so he was commenting on Henrietta Nodi at the 1992 Olympic vault final, and he said, "She's often nervous and often absent-minded. Let's hope she doesn't forget what vault she's doing." What?
Women are stupid, Jessica. Sorry, just to clarify, that is what was happening here.
I mean, they were just invented in 1986. Like, they only had a couple years to grow brains. I mean, So, yeah, maybe don't say that about people. And like, unless a gymnast literally in their pre-interview is like, I sometimes forget my vaults. I often forget my vaults. Could you let the public know that I forget the vault I'm doing midair? Like, if they tell you to say that, then yeah, okay. And you say, she told me that. You start it with that. You don't guess that she's absent-minded and nervous, going to forget her vault in the Olympic final. What?
Yeah. I mean, we could do a whole episode about the construction of women's gymnasts as fragile and nervous and unable to mentally cope with hitting a routine instead of just being like, oh, beam is hard. Sometimes you're going to fall because beam is hard. And like contrast it with like, imagine if Sam McCulloch were a female gymnast and how his mental ability to hit routines would be constructed versus how it is. Like, I mean, we talk about it a lot. The commentators talk about it a lot, but it like the tone and the vocabulary is completely different.
Yeah. So let's talk about in our Hall of Shame, another chapter.
Let's get to we've barely Al Trautwigged.
We could do an entire podcast on Al Trautwig.
Yeah, there are 10 sub-podcasts, 10 more subcategories. But the main thing we need to talk about is Al Trautwig's creepy and weird and mean obsession with adoption. Yes. Most specifically highlighted in the Simone's parents incident, where he refused to acknowledge Simone's parents as Simone's parents because, heaven forbid, someone would have a family situation that's different from the one he approves of or experienced himself. And so you can't just say that the people who adopted Simone and became her parents because they adopted her are her parents.
He also made a whole thing about Yule. One of our Twitter, listeners on Twitter reminded us of that whole thing with Yule where he was like, so what is his background? Or his background is like, had to point out, like, it's not what era are you from that adoption is not normal and a common thing or something that needs to be remarked on? Like, it's none of your business. And also shut up about it. And also it's none of your business. So shut up. Yeah, anyway. So, and then what was the thing that he said about the whole Koko Tsurumi thing? Because I don't remember what happened.
This is one of my... Okay, this is 2011 World Championships team final. Koko's in Tokyo. Koko Tsurumi goes on floor. And horror of horrors, her floor music did not sound Japanese.
What?
Uh-huh. I know. Aren't you tremendously offended? He was very upset that a Japanese gymnast would compete at Worlds in Tokyo without choosing floor music that sounded stereotypically Japanese enough for Al Trautwig to recognize it. Because, he said he wanted music from her home country, but I was like, okay, so if she had picked like a J-pop floor routine, you would have been really happy about it, or you would have been like, why didn't she pick something more Japanese-y sounding?
And you're a connoisseur of Japanese music. Yeah.
Because he just looks at gymnasts, non-white or non-American gymnasts, and just sees other and is like, you need to reinforce that. So he basically, what you want every single member of the Japanese team to have exactly the same type of music that you recognize as Japanese, because that seems really boring to me.
Yeah. God, I remember that too. It's like he is from a time machine where he's never like read a book or watched TV or been exposed to like any people that were like thinking differently since the 30s, maybe. The 20s is too liberal for him. So I'm trying to pick an era.
Yeah, he would not approve of the 20s.
He was also obsessed with, well, let's talk about the Romanian athlete and that one routine where he went through everything that didn't have to do with her gymnastics during her beam.
Yeah, and when they specifically called out her having hepatitis B during her beam routine.
And how her coaches were upset that she didn't tell them she had hepatitis B. And I'm just like, isn't this private? And shouldn't you shut up?
Yeah, it's fun TV commentary. Everyone loves that. There are a number of ways you can get hepatitis B.
Anyway. Not that there's any shame in having any of the hepatitises. And I want to emphasize that is not what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, again, it's like this. If something good happens, it's the something positive. It is the adults and male humans' responsibility. If something that is seen as a negative, someone gets sick, if they fall, if they whatever, it's the fault of the gymnast specifically. So only positives are attributed outside of the agency of the woman. And then he's obsessed with if you're not from a nuclear family with two different sex parents.
That was a whole NBC thing. Like, that was fluff pieces about it in 2000. Right. Yeah.
It was like dead fathers, no father, never knew her father. Is it her father intentionally was like, let me quick die before this baby gets to know me? Like, don't you understand that they had like a nuclear disaster and fought like a massive war where they lost like 20 million or something people before we even got into the war, and you're gonna blame all these people for like, and the men are conscripted into the military like in Russia, and you're going to blame these girls for not knowing their fathers? Like, what's wrong with you?
Or just like using that as like a narrative device. Like, fine if you want to give some backstory so that the people, I don't care about that. Jessica cares about that. Like, so that people are familiar with like who you are and feel like they get to know you as an athlete as they're watching. But like, it's the whole NBC hyper drama. Like, where can we find the sobbiest part of your backstory? Ooh, dead father. Yes. Like, they're so excited. It's that like seeming excited that you have like something that you can try to make a tearjerker moment out of.
Yeah. And it's just like, so like if that came up, if you were doing something, but like to just be like, oh, here's a person on beam. She never knew her father. So that's probably why she doesn't look like she's doing a good routine right now. Like, it wasn't when, she became a world champion, it was time to talk about that. It was, she's off today. Must be the dead father.
Yeah. And it is like also used as an avenue to give undue credit, as in the entire amount of credit, to the male head coach of the national team, to like be like, oh, well, she didn't have a father, but no one could possibly ever be successful without a father in their lives. So fortunately, they have insert Octavian Bellew or Leonid Arkayev here to become that father.
Oh, I want to go back to hepatitis B, because that is the one that it comes from fluid, blood. And so I feel like that was an extra shaming of her for possibly being, a person with a sex life. Possibly. And so that was another reason that it was shaming her for, intentionally trying to, be a person with a life who may have, so that's even worse as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, that guy. And also, like, what kind of coach goes around announcing your medical conditions to the freaking commentators?
Yeah, I mean, that was a thing, like, if we remember, I mean, this is common knowledge at this point, but like on our show, when it came out that Simone had that therapeutic use exemption to use whatever medication she's using, and then the Russians were like, grr, she's doping, and everyone was like, no, that's not what that is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we talked about that, and it was like, some people were upset about that, which I totally understand, which is like, you're, communicating her private medical information in public, which was kind of like, my reaction was like, it's already a story, and so that information, like, I wouldn't reveal it myself without permission, but that was already out there. This is not a situation, but even that, it's like, be sensitive with people's medical history.
It wasn't like we didn't, uncover it. It was like, the fancy hat bears did their
No, that's what I'm saying. It's like, but I understand. Like, I completely also understand why people were like, oh, that's kind of weird to talk about. I'm like, yes, I get that. I understand exactly where you're coming from. This is like, no one was even talking about or knew that. They were just like, fun fact, happy. It's so weird.
Yeah. I want to go back to one thing about Monica Phelps that I forgot to mention. She called round-offs an Arab jump. She doesn't call them round-offs.
I'm very fascinated by this.
That
sounds like an Arab Spring.
I kept thinking she was saying the Arab Spring, and I was like, what? But she calls them an Arab something. And I was like, I for the longest time, I was like, what is she talking about? Like, I kept thinking, like, calling people, by the wrong name, because she would often identify or just add in a skill that wasn't done. And so I was like, is she saying there's an Arabian skill there when it's not actually an Arabian? But then I realized it's a round-off, an Arab Spring.
Well, that's what it's called
every
now.
Time. An Arab Spring. Okay, so Tim Daggett about Zamo.
Oh yeah, which is when she came back. When she came back to like go towards 2004 and competed in 2003, Tim was like, Al prompted him, so clearly they had like prepped this part, and Tim said he didn't want her to come back because, quote, I didn't want to see this sad person out on the floor. Which is one of those, like, let's just keep that one inside.
Yes.
Just like,
do not judge women during a competition on your perceived. Right.
Yeah.
And even if there's crying.
Don't assume whether someone's sad or, like, you don't know.
Right. I mean, this is the thing, like, men don't get judged for like throwing things and kicking stuff and like screaming and cussing on in the, sports balls. But women who cry are ascribed that's a negative thing if you cry. But I was like, these two things are equivalent. The fact that you don't understand how you're not so-and-so's pissed off. He's not happy that he did that. It's the same. I mean, you can have emotion about your performance, and that is not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. It's fine. It's really difficult what these people are doing. Emotions are running high, and whatever just happened, it happened in front of everybody. It's fine.
Yeah. It's also that thing. It was thinking about crying. It made me think of one of the athletes from Cincinnati talking about recently in Gymnast Alliance, talking about Mary Lee, and talking about how Mary Lee, like Mary Lee really wanted her to cry, and all of her teammates were like, just cry, so that she stops giving you a hard time about it. But then we also saw things, if you remember that Beyond the Routine that Flo Gymnastics did at Cincinnati, where it was like, no, now you're crying too much. And it's like, you're creating an impossible standard where it's like, we need to see your humanity. Like, we need to see you cry, but also not too much, because then you're emotional.
And that's
you're
also
not coachable.
Right. And you're not coachable. And this is the other thing that I think is interesting about Nastia, because Nastia said in her book, Letters to a Young Gymnast, I think it's called, that the reason she was as good as she was is because she did not let Bella break her. She never gave everything. She always kept something in reserve. And I was like, this isn't something you should have to worry about. And I didn't necessarily think like you can interpret that two ways. You can interpret it as emotional or as physical. Mm-hmm. And for me, she was emotionally tougher and had her wits about her more than for sure Bella. But yeah, I mean, there is a point that you want to get athletes to like get them past what they think their limits are. But the breaking is different. That's like breaking a horse. That's like breaking the will to stand up for yourself is how I interpret it. So I thought that was an interesting comment from her in her book. I think of that very often. I think about it a lot, Spencer.
Yeah.
So chapter 4.
Let's go.
Tragic moments in college commentary. Spencer, you could do a whole podcast on this.
Another whole podcast, yeah. I mean, there is a whole school of the poor student who is like interested in going into broadcasting, who has been assigned the gymnastics meet and has clearly never watched gymnastics before. And they say many stupid things and make many mistakes. And I don't want to do too much of that because I feel like that it's not malicious. Like, there are a lot of things we could talk about in this episode where commentators make mistakes, like that time that commentator said Shin Jae-hwan was well hung, which I talk about forever because it's my favorite thing ever. That was just a flub of the words. He went on a gap year between his brain and his mouth, and that's what happened there. It's like an honest mistake. The things we want to talk about are like, there's some, like, this was malicious, but we do expect at least a modicum of preparation, or like have Googled the sport before, at least before you do your college commentary on gymnastics. So like, just a note, the balance bar is not an event. There's no such thing as balance
Chelsea
bar.
Memo does her conditioning.
That's true. Chelsea invented balance bar. It's not called balance bar, nor is it called beams. There's one. You're just competing on beam. It's not a beams. Also, the event is vault, not table. You can talk about the vaulting table if you want, as contrasted to the vaulting horse that we used to have, but gymnasts don't rotate to table, and they don't score a 9-7 on table. Note one particular Pac-12 network commentator whose name I don't know because I've never bothered to learn. It's not table.
Yeah.
Or you don't need to say the names of the gymnast parents every time. That's not analysis.
No one cares about their parents. Nobody cares. I do not care. Like, unless your parent is like an astronaut, a movie star, or a former gymnast, then you can bring it up once.
Even then, like once.
One time.
Once. You can bring up Mary Lou Retton's name one time.
Right. Oh my God. Okay, so I also wanted to bring up the time that there was a headline in, I think, like Sports Illustrated or something. I'm so sorry if this wasn't Sports Illustrated, whatever it was. And it was like, NFL player so-and-so proposes to girlfriend. When what actually happened was a world champion gymnast accepted a proposal from her boyfriend because she is more accomplished in sports than him. And that is the thing that should have been in the headline. More sexism. Also, another huge, this was a bad one. So going back in time now, because I want to give credit where credit is due. The first Pride, quote unquote, meet was called the Equality Meet, which was a Nike theme before they were ready to say Pride. Times, we gotta move with the times. Anyway, so it was not called the Pride Meet. It was Equality Meet. Amy Smith put it together when she was at North Carolina, and it was with Florida, and it was a huge success, and the gymnasts loved it, and it was like groundbreaking. So, but it wasn't called a Pride Meet. So the first ever actual Pride Meet that was called a Pride Meet that literally had every single LGBTQ plus flag on the floor and included a pride cape worn as a stick crown by the gymnasts when they had a good routine or whatever. You didn't have to really do anything. Just run with the pride flag because it's a pride meet and it was so awesome. So that the Pac-12 network failed to mention the theme of the meet. Failed to mention the theme of the meet, despite the 117 pride flags and the literal pride flag cape that the gymnasts were running around in. Mm-hmm. So that is also a huge, huge oversight. And when they had covered many other meet themes in the past, like all of them.
Or discussed many other stick objects, like a stick crown.
Right.
Spend a lot of time talking about like, oh, the stick crown. But if there's a stick pride flag,
we don't know what that is.
We don't know what that means. We don't know why there's the word pride is in big on a rainbow on someone's back. That's just on the screen and we're going to pretend it's not happening.
She's running in a cape. It's just a cape.
A non-specific cape.
So I want to bring up chapter 5, racism and bias. And I feel like this is another one. Like when I started digging into this, there are 100. We could just do an entire commission on racism in gymnastics. But let's start with. So Mitch Fenner was really known as one of the great commentators and very thoughtful, but he also did a Chinese, his Chinese accent once, which was very cringy. So no accents unless you're imitating Marta, then it's fine, obviously. Exception for us.
Or imitating Tim Daggett.
Right.
That's absolutely fine.
Right. So there's also a really great Tumblr, which one of our listeners pointed out, called No Chill Gym Broadcasts. So this is a gem that I found on there. So some guy named Greg Lewis. So this is the 1992 Olympic Games. Following a Spanish gymnast receiving a 9.8 for her vault, Vidmar had previously said, well, the crowd isn't booing, so I guess they must be educated enough to know a step is not good. The crowd began to boo. Vidmar said, well, I guess they aren't educated enough. So this guy, Greg Lewis, says, well, the ones who aren't as educated can't read as well, so it took them longer to get the score. So this is, again, 92 happening in Barcelona, Spain. So I would put this under the category of racism and super rude and not okay to say about an audience. Do you not understand the audience are the whole reason you have a job? The audience, without them, no one's going to pay you to commentate on gymnastics. It starts with the gymnast. It starts with whoever has money to pay for the gymnast to do gymnastics. It's for the owners to open a gym, for all of this stuff to happen and travel to meets. And then it's the audience. So don't be a dick to the audience is the other important thing to do. More on that later in chapter 17. There's also when Trautwig said, Tim, you may have just made an understatement, the understatement of gymnastics. There's a Chinese gymnast and she's young. So this whole idea that like Asian people always are younger, they're always cheating the age system. And then they also like blaming the gymnast for something that their country has done. And again, not blaming, like Romania famously did this. Famously, the gymnasts talk about it. And no one ever says that about the Romanians. There's a Romanian. Does she look 13? Because you know how they have all those 12 different passports. And Daniela Silva just talked all about this. Like that's never said. It's only the non-white people who Trautwig loved to point out. So.
Yes, that. So our next portion of the show, GymCastic's official gymnastics broadcasts, do's and don'ts. We have a lot of don'ts.
So many.
But we shoehorned in some do's. Basically, my approach to official gymnastics broadcasts is don't. Don't.
I wrote all my don'ts first, and then I tried to think of a do, and it was so hard. We're trying to represent,
trying to be positive,
trying to not just be negative. If we want the culture to change, that it's also incumbent upon us to give examples of what to do and not just be like, rah, rah, rah. But that's more fun. So we start. That's what's so hard.
Yes. Okay, I do have a do to start with.
Okay.
point out the difference between good routines and great routines to help the viewers understand why the ranking ends up how it is. So a good commentary doesn't necessarily mean always only say positive things all the time and only compliments. It should be mostly that, because otherwise you kind of sound mean. You become Monica Phelpsy. But, it's helpful to point out those deductions, sometimes maybe as like a compliment sandwich. But don't act like a gymnast killed your mother when she falls on beam. Just like, why are you so mad? Like, why are you annoyed or disgusted, Elfi? Why do you have to go, ugh, such a simple skill? Or oh, I can't believe she did that. Like, you can't.
Really? It's gymnastics. People fall all the time. It's hard.
And it was not a big deal because it's classic. Really? Okay. Or just being such a callous buzzard, so unnecessarily mean, so unnecessarily.
A callous buzzard?
Yeah. Don't be a callous buzzard as a gymnastics commentator. That's very difficult for me. So people need to, I'm giving advice to people. Don't be a callous buzzard. Learn.
I'm going to say that's don't be a cockwomble. That's
Sure.
what they would say in the Britishes.
Okay.
I learned that.
Another horrible commentary Hall of Fame moment. This is a Trautwig special about Carly Patterson. Miss Patterson is like a car that's been dented. You can fix that dent in the shop, but you'll always remember you had it. What a gross thing to say about someone.
Especially a minor, like a child. What's wrong with you?
Heaven forbid Carly fell on beam once. So, she is a shame on her family and the sport and all of us. That's what we learned from that. Okay, my next to do is intelligently analyze the things that are happening in front of your face.
Right in front of you.
Say what's happening, see it, communicate what you saw, but don't make claims about someone's internal mental state that you couldn't possibly know. She just doesn't believe in herself. Really? Are you in her head? Because that's quite a claim, that she doesn't believe in herself, or she doesn't have it mentally.
Did she tell you that specifically? Did she, in the pre-interview, did she say, my problem right now is that I don't believe in myself? Could you let the viewers know that?
Yeah. There was a routine that a number of people sent in, a American Cup routine, where they were just going on this is a rude awakening. She's having a rude awakening. She is overwhelmed by this competition. And it's she fell a couple times. Not necessarily the same thing. But also there is the flip side of that, which is not as bad because it's a compliment, but saying she just really loves she loves gymnastics. She loves being out there. She really loves what she's doing. Seems like a nice thing to say, but then you think, really? Because her coach calls her stupid every single day. I'm thinking about this is the lesson of commenting on Laurie Hernandez's gymnastics, I think, is she did always look super happy when she was competing. There was a smile. She looked like she loved to perform. And I think, to some of that, she could have maybe did enjoy meets and performing, but that saying oh, she just loves it. She's so happy. She's doing so great. Helps paper over what we now know was going on behind the scenes with her training situation. So that's not really making those leaps, even if they're positive, aren't really helpful either, because it allows, coaches to maintain the veneer of I'm the great and my gymnasts are happy and I'm the great coach, even if that's not the case, as we've learned in this particular instance.
The most important one, bold, get this in neon lights if you're a commentator and put it on the wall in front of you, blinking at you night and day.
Don't be obsessed with whether the gymnast is smiling or not when she's getting her score.
Or at any time.
Or at any
time.
You can. I'm okay with don't be the smile police. You can be the performance quality police, because that is part of the sport. investing in your performance, but that means many different things. It does not necessarily mean smiling, is part of the sport. That is scored. So as a commentator, you can analyze and assess that. That is fine. But it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be smiling. And when when they're not performing a routine, then you got nothing. You've got nothing, because that is not smiling while sitting on one of the chairs with the bags, with all the backpacks, is not in their job description. So, they're not there. They're not there to make friends. They're not there to seem happy.
I love this next one. I feel like it's the most important thing. It should be number one as a commentator.
To make the athlete the subject of the sentence. Mm-hmm. This is my next do. Because they're the ones doing it. Don't make the coach the subject of the sentence. You can give credit to a coach. They are absolutely essential figures in the development of the gymnast, but they are support staff. They are there to help someone else succeed. That's why you get into coaching. You get into coaching to be in the predicate of the sentence while someone else is in the subject. That's the whole thing. So if you're praising an athlete, make them the subject of the sentence, and the coach can be in the predicate. They're not Bella's girls. They're, Christy Phillips, coached by Bella Caroli. Not Bella doesn't have his girls doing great things. Carrie Strug, who happens to be coached by Bella Caroli, did a great routine.
Now, this is my most favorite of all of them. I have a lot of favorites on your list. I highlighted this in red and said, Spencer, I love you.
My last do, Jessica's going to have a lot, so don't worry. My last do is to treat the viewing audience as peers. Talk to us as peers. Don't speak to the audience like they're stupider than you or need to be educated by the brilliant things that you know. You probably do know more about gymnastics than most of the people watching. That's why you have that job. That's why you're paid to do it. That's why you're sitting there talking about it on television. But no one wants to hear that you think you're smarter than them or that they don't know things. Don't start a sentence with, this is an all sport thing. Don't start a sentence with, what people don't understand is, because that is extremely off-putting. No one wants to listen to someone who's like, here's why you're stupid. That's not a great way. And you have that knowledge, use that knowledge, but just say it. Don't dumb yourself down. No one wants you to dumb yourself down or pretend you don't know where the deductions are coming from, even when you absolutely know where the deductions are coming from, because you're literally a gymnastics coach. But just say them. Don't pretend like you are in a position to educate another, because you're just there to say what you see.
My list.
I'm ready.
So do praise quality, skills, and tenacity. That's good. Mm-hmm. Don't act like the athlete fell or crashed on purpose to insult you as a human being, specifically.
Hashtag memo to Donna Strauss. She was not falling to get attention.
No one is ever going to be as hard on themselves as an elite athlete in any sport. It's one of the things that makes them great and the hardest thing about their personalities, and the hardest thing about being them, I think, when you're always so hard on yourself. So don't pile on. Like, your job can be to show compassion for someone who's giving us so much joy by being able to watch them and enjoy their performance, regardless of what happens. So do use your platform to empower and give agency to girls and women. Hey, this is the Olly Hogben section. Do what Olly Hogben does and follow his instructions to a T on this and listen to our interviews with him. Don't give all the credit for everything these women or girls do to their parents, coaches, host family, federation, or choreographer. You can give them credit, but don't give them all the credit. Remember to make the woman or girl the subject of the sentence. So Shannon Miller worked hard on her choreography, not Peggy Liddick. Shannon did the work. Peggy is a paid employee, and yes, she helped, but Shannon is the one who did the work and made the change and improved her choreography. Gymnasts are the stars. It is not your job to make stars out of coaches and federations and national team coordinators and whoever else. That's not your job. Your job is to focus on the real stars who are the actual gymnasts, including people who look different than you, people that are younger than you, and perhaps more accomplished than you'll ever be in your entire sorry life, Al Trautwig.
No one's buying a ticket to a meet to see John Geddert.
Case in point. So do bring up fashion or hair if the gymnast has shared something specific with you about it. And
like Wei Sao Yuan's bow, which there was an interview about.
There's an interview. She wanted to share about it, so that's okay. Don't talk about Black women's hair unless she specifically gave you a backstory to tell about it. Like, I mean, I'm just thinking about like a power mohawk, for example. Throwing it out there, because that always requires discussion and there's a story behind it. But otherwise, shush it. Don't talk about Black women's hair. Do mention the training schedule of a gymnast. That's okay. It's really interesting to hear about who trains this many hours compared to someone else who trains less, someone else trains more, how they work school and all of that kind of stuff. Don't talk about missing the fucking prom. Don't talk about them missing fucking dances or not going on dates. You don't know if they give a shit about the prom. You don't know if they were like, prom or travel the world for gymnastics. Duh, I'm deciding this. Or if they said, oh my God, I want to skip this because the prom is the most important thing in my life. Unless you've had that discussion with them, zip it. You don't know if these American traditional life, benchmarks matter to them or not. Don't just assume because prom was the most important night of your life and everything's been downhill since then, that is how these gymnasts also feel. So unless you're told that the gymnast made that sacrifice and they felt it was a sacrifice, don't put your position about it, your feelings about it on them. And this again goes to your biases, which clearly, I feel like prom, take it or leave it, whatever. But if someone loves it and it's really important to them, then that's something to talk about. It's something they are choosing to do. And every time that you take away that agency, you're taking away the power from the actual gymnast, make them the subject of the sentence. So do comment on the crowd and the fan reactions to athletes. That's really cool. We can't always see what's going on. So it's really cool if you see something there live and in person that you witness. It's fun for us to know about this stuff. Don't criticize a gymnast for, especially women, because I've never seen this happen with a male gymnast. Please let me know if I'm wrong, but I've never seen it. Don't criticize a gymnast for acknowledging fans, waving, enjoying the audience, don't say they're distracted by. I mean, how many times did sexy Alexi, how many times did the commentators say, he's a sex symbol, so it's really hard for him to concentrate with all of these gym moms throwing their underwear at him from the stands. Like, that's the kind of comment that would happen if we were commenting.
Right.
They no one makes that kind of comment about the men. But if a woman waves at a fan, if a woman signs an autograph during the meet, or contrarily, if she's, not acknowledging the fans, then that's all up for, it's a problem. It's distracting. And so she's not paying enough attention. She's not there. She doesn't care. She's, but she's, it's too much. So just shush it about that. Speak about female and male athletes in the same language, using the same language. So don't talk about a gymnast, again, sacrificing a romantic life if you don't do the same for the male athletes. So don't point out gymnast mothers if you don't also point out the gymnasts who are fathers. Don't talk about leotards on women or fashion if you're not going to talk about leotards or fashion with the men when you commentate on their meets. Don't talk about a man's profession if you don't talk about women's professions. So let's talk about, look at Epke, who is a doctor. If you're going to talk about Epke, of being a doctor, you also have to talk about Hudi Garbasian, who has a master's degree, works at the Cleveland Clinic, is a ninja physician's assistant delivery person. So that you got to talk about both of those things. If you're going to talk about professions, you need to talk about women's and men's. So do talk about current scientific principles. If you're going to talk about science, make sure it's a current scientific principle. So don't talk about, for example, the ancient gymnastics wisdom passed down from your coach's coach on a dusty scroll. That's old and probably has been debunked by now and is not based in science. So don't say someone is not using good technique just because they seem to you to have more muscle tone. Don't assume someone is stronger than someone other just because you can see more pronounced muscle tone on them. That happens often with Black gymnasts. Don't judge people on how their bodies appear to your mind's filter. Don't talk about their bodies in general is how you avoid that. So do share your own experiences about doing a skill because it helps the audience appreciate it. And it's interesting. I think it's really interesting when people say, I tried this for 10 years and could never do it because the timing is so hard or whatever. But don't keep reiterating how you once saw someone do it and get hurt. So it scares you now every time you see someone do it. Just because one person got hurt doesn't mean that this athlete doesn't have Olly Raisman ligaments and muscles and can do it 100 times like that and never be hurt. Do explain the code. Don't use the word grandma to ascribe an uncultured person who hasn't memorized the freaking code. Don't use the word grandma. Just stop.
I don't think I know what this is specifically referring to. Will you explain it in further detail?
We had in our very first interview ever, we interviewed, this comes up a lot. I hear this, a grandma referred to as someone who doesn't know. And I always think when I have gray hair, if anybody calls me a grandma, I will yell at them that I have never procreated and they better shut up and not call me that.
I can't wait.
Also, there's nothing wrong with being a grandma. It's perfectly fine. Very much enjoyed both my grandmothers. So very first episode we ever had, Tim Daggett was our first guest on GymCastic. And he talked about, my job is to translate gymnastics to, a grandma in Kansas who doesn't know the code. And I was like, oh, dude, grandma in Kansas, you mean with her degree in physics, who's a professor and running, runs a nuclear silo and has 3 medical degrees. So I just find that in general, and it's also often used a grandma is used to anybody who's not a teenager who does gymnastics, and gymnasts say that about themselves.
Yeah. You're allowed to say it about yourself.
You can say whatever you want about yourself.
Where it's
go ahead. Yeah. You do you, and you be proud. You can be totally proud. I am the grandma of my team. Be proud of it. I have a wrestling, my wrestling teammate who's always called herself the grandma. And she's literally 20 years older than us. It looks younger than all of us. So yeah, just don't use grandma as a word to ascribe ignorance to other people because it's super insulting and sexist. Do pay compliments and explain when the gymnast is earning a bonus. I would really like people to change the language around this. And it's something that I can really work on too. So don't only talk about
it's not breaking connections, but
making a
performing connections.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, she just, and I love that, especially I think the Australians and the British do this. They say you got paid. So, I got paid 10 of my connections, but I didn't get paid for 2. So they actually make it into a positive instead of saying because it's already a negative sport. You start from this and you get deductions, right? But we can change our language to start making it positive. And there's actually people who have created entire codes of points based on paying compliments and paying bonus credit and giving, ascribing, making sure there is a positive associated with each gymnastic skill and every routine instead of making it a negative that is a deduction. And I wish that we would do that because it's already a hard enough sport without everything having about being what's taken away. We could make it what's given. So, it's So that's something like you can be like, oh, she just got a bonus for that. Oh, she got another bonus for that. And I realized, like, just doing the new podcast, doing Gymnastics International, when we talked about some of the Chinese routines, I was like, oh, no credit, or yep, credit. And I could change the way I'm doing to,
Yeah. And I think to some extent that is just the code and the way it is.
And it's also interpreting what the judges are doing. And so that's fine. Mm-hmm. But I think that we often go more on the negative side instead of, it is, you guys. I mean, okay, so do combat stereotypes about age, height, ability of gymnasts who have professions, ability of gymnasts who are parents. So don't perpetuate stereotypes by constantly talking about how hard it is to be a 28-year-old 5'5" gymnast with a degree who's still doing professional gymnastics. Point out all the people who have successfully competed like this person. So instead of saying it's so hard to do gymnastics when you're 5'5", talk about, she's 5'5", and one of the, the second most accomplished gymnast of all time was also 5'5", and she was a 4-time world champion, or 10-time, or 100-time, whatever Horkina was. And there's many other examples of that, but that's one way that you can say, or like, she's a mother and she's come back. We have the list of all these other mothers who have come back, and, she's Vitna, and et cetera, et cetera. Do ascribe a character theme. Okay, so do ascribe a character theme or musical interpretation to a gymnast if they have told you what it is in their performance.
Or if you are creating a comedy version of it, as we do on this podcast.
Which is fine. That is all totally okay. Because sometimes there are some gymnasts also who don't want you to know the theme. They want you to interpret it. And so you can say, like, this is it's a Spanish inspired, bullfighter, but who's taking bullfighting to vegan audiences by making it actually stabbing them with rainbows.
That's excellent.
Right? So don't say a gymnast is showing her personality as a way to describe a floor routine or a beam theme of choreography. That is not a personality, is not a characteristic that is part of the code of points, that is part of gymnastics. That's not, no. Personality, unless she told you specifically, the theme of my floor routine is me. I am dangerous and I want to be a spy. And I did, unless she tells you that, a personality showing her personality, no, trash. That's out of there. No, you have to have a theme. You don't have to have a character, but you have to have a theme that carries throughout. So if you can't identify that, the routine is, that's what I have to say about that. Unless it's a very unique person. Like Elizabeth Reed, she was the theme, I would say, of her choreography, because she was just unique and unlike anybody else. But otherwise, there should be identifiable something, and it's not personality. Oh, don't get me started on personality. Oh, wait, we have a chapter on that. So I don't know what to tell you to do instead for this one. I couldn't come up with one, so I'm just going to go to the don't. You tell me what the do is for this last one. So don't judge women for their game face or not showing emotion during performances. So this you kind of covered with the don't be the smile police. But it goes beyond that, because I'm thinking especially of Michaela Skinner and how she got nonstop criticized for just acting like any male human who does a ball sport. Like, she was pissed when she didn't get her scores, and she showed that she was pissed off, but somehow that made her the worst, most horrible sport in all of gymnastics. My God, how dare she express a displeasure as a female human? That's absolutely unacceptable. The Victorians would not have it. She would be ostracized from society. I mean, basically, that is the carrying down the lineage of how women should act and not act. So, there's an example of this is Steve Rollabard commenting on Simone during the Rio Olympics, and he said she gives the impression of only taking passing interest of what's going on around her. Did you think maybe the Olympics is a big deal and she can do whatever she needs to do to make it through 2 weeks of competition and all the pressure that's around her? So if she wants to pick at her nails or watch anime or, learn a dance on TikTok during competition, she should. She can do whatever she wants. She's not here to make you think that she's interested or not. You don't matter, in fact. She has a job to do. How would you like it if I showed up at your work and I followed you around, Steve Rollabard, and I was like, oh, can you smile more? It doesn't look like you're enjoying work. When you type that, could you sit up a little more and maybe smile? Because I want to see your personality on the typing event. When you're commentating, could you do it with a little more panache? Because I just feel like it's boring to watch you, and I'm not hearing a smile in your voice. Could you just smize a little bit when you're speaking into the microphone, Steve Rollabard? Because it's really looking like you don't care that you're here. And so I just feel like, especially like, don't say this shit about Black women. Especially, I feel like this is an extra tinge of like racism when it comes to talking about Simone like that. Like, but anyway, again, we can do a whole separate podcast on that. So I don't know what the do is for that. Just shut up about what you think people are feeling.
I don't know what the do is for that. Just shut up.
GymCastic in a nutshell. Commentators, just shut up.
Just know that we like always mute you. Just that's why it was kind of hard to come up with commentary, because I'm like, oh, it's just I always have it muted.
It is. I don't listen anymore. One, because I don't want to be influenced, but also because I don't want to have a rage stroke while I'm watching it, because it makes me so mad. I just had a couple.
Also, just too much auditory stimulation. Sometimes I'm just like, I need to just get this out of here.
This is why I like Kathy.
He says on a podcast. That's why I don't care for podcasts.
That's also why we like who we like, because they shut up during the gymnastics. Like during a floor routine, just whoosh, and do your interpreting when we have like all the boring stuff when they walk off the floor. Unless there's something really important, like, oh, she just got like an extra 3/10 of bonus for that. It's really hard to do. But otherwise, just let us enjoy the performance. Like, can you imagine if you went to a play or like a dance performance and there was someone in your ear the whole time being like, that was a split leap. That was a blah, blah, blah. Now she's going to go on point. Oh, now he's going to lift her into the balance. Blah, blah, blah. Like, I would be like, oh my God, shut up. Like, that would be the worst person if you're like at the ballet, right? So like the commentator, this is what Kathy and Bart
described what it's like to watch a TV show with you, though. I will say, I agree with your comment completely, but that is what it's like to watch any television show with Jessica.
It's so true. It's so true.
It's not in public, though. You don't do it in public.
Oh my God, it's so true. And oh my God, my mom is the same way, and it drives me nuts. Oh my God, this is why Coop and I worked so well together, because he thinks it's hilarious and I crack him up with all my commentary. But seriously, like, this has to do with how I was raised, because my parents would not let me watch TV without them being there to annotate and teach me to analyze and teach me to critically think about what I was watching, especially the advertisements. Like, my dad would be like, why did they just show boys playing with this and not girls playing with the trucks? And I was like, sexism. And this is how I learned to be who I am. So I just can't help it. And when my mom does it, it makes me nuts. Oh my God. She started commenting during True Blood, and I was like,
oh my God. You were Mom, like, nope.
This is my show. Don't speak. Okay, anyway, broadcast camera rules. So I feel very passionate about this, and I feel like this affects what the commentators are able to talk about. So it's one of those things where, like, it's one thing to criticize the camera people, but it's really important that they are shown things that don't put them in really awkward, weird conversations and make them able to talk about stuff. So
like, what am I supposed to say when you're doing a close-up of a wedgie in the corner of floor?
Right. Like, don't put the commentators or the athletes, don't embarrass the athletes is the number one rule of athletic training. And I feel like it's also should be the number one rule of broadcasting, which is clearly not. So we need to talk this a little bit later, maybe on behind the scenes this week. So if you're a Club Gym Nerd member, I have a lot of feelings about this week. There's something that happened in a meet, and I thought to myself at first, I was like, oh my God, that's so embarrassing. And then I was like, wait, why am I embarrassed about this? This is like, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Why should I be embarrassed for this person? So we'll like, I feel like it just suddenly, I had a light bulb moment about it.
Ooh, I'm excited. I don't even know what you're talking. I don't even know what you're implying to refer to. So,
so what's available to discuss what's shown on the screen? So the rules are never shoot tumbling passes from the corner, coming straight on or going away from you, because that's not how it's judged. So, and this is not how we can appreciate the full, you can't see everything from straight on. So don't do that. Always shoot from the side. So also never shoot sitting down or sitting below the corner, because if you are below the corner, all you will get is crotch shots and booty shots. And I'm always like, this is clear. So it can only be in an intentional way of shooting when I see that happen in college, and you see it much, much less often now. But I'm just like, why would you do that? Like, I feel like it's some dirty trick being played by some gross director somewhere, because it can't be ignorance at this point, right? You would hope.
Everything can always be ignorance.
Oh my God. So camera should always be perpendicular to the apparatus, except the occasional beam long ways shot, because that's interesting to see if people can stay on or not, or if there's a wobble, how close they were.
Do that for replays.
For replays, not
for replays.
Right, not during the shot. Never show gymnasts not doing gymnastics live. So if you're live, you show gymnastics, period. That is the rule. You do have a camera, follow the gymnast for reactions. And so that if something funny or cute happens before teammates, or, someone shows
Carly Patterson goes, oh, that's too bad.
You show that in the replay. There's someone that's, one of the directors is watching that. You have someone, a producer, that's on that replay camera, is like, oh, show this. Simone just said that routine was a piece of shit, and make sure we broadcast that. So that's what you do on replays, but live you only show routines. So prioritize gymnastics routines, the actual gymnastics, because by the way, we're watching for the gymnastics over all else. We don't care about anyone's parents when we could be watching gymnastics.
And also, we don't need to have a close-up of the gymnast when their score comes up. Like, that's not a necessity. That is how all gymnastics broadcasts are broadcast. Oh, we have to show Simone for forever because we're waiting for her score. You know what else you could do? Have a little picture of Simone in the bottom corner when her score comes up, and just put her score right there.
Right.
E-score, total. Simone Biles. Here's her picture, so you remember who we're talking about. Boom. But we're also showing someone else's beam routine right there.
Picture in picture, split screen. The SEC
almost like that
network
technology exists.
And has existed for 50 years. The SEC network has mastered this. They've even split the screen into 4s. But somehow NBC hasn't got the memo on this yet. I would say that since the last Olympics, the NBC digital broadcast won an Emmy and did things very differently, that maybe because they did so much better and were acknowledged for it compared to the main broadcast, that maybe they will start implementing some of that stuff. But I don't know. Maybe I have, ridiculous expectations.
High expectations. I'm disappointed that even though Trautwig is gone, we still have to do the green triangles. Oh, there's my don't. Don't just put some colored shapes up there, or try to reinterpret the code of points in a way that you think is going to be easier for the people watching who you think are super stupid. So you don't put the difficulty score and the execution score, you put max score and deductions. And it's like, that's not even what we do here.
Also, are people who are just of normal intelligence, but you are thinking that the code of points is way too complicated. It's really not that complicated. Things are worth this, connections are worth this, deductions are this. It's really not that complicated. So don't act like it's freaking rocket science.
Shitting all over the sport is for afterward. Like when you are on a podcast, or you like get together with your gym nerds and you're like, isn't the code so stupid? It's so stupid because of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Obviously, that's called being a gymnastics fan. But if you're doing like television commentary, act like you like it.
Please act like you like it.
You like it.
Act like you like it so hard. All right, so we go to part C.
Part C are banned words and phrases.
Yes.
Ones we're getting rid of, just out of gymnastics forever. We talked about personality already. That is obviously the main one. Both in terms of telling people to show personality on floor, and also as a criticism of Romanian or Russian gymnasts who happen to have personalities.
Or who train differently.
A little bit of personality. That means she talks back to her coach and is therefore a monster.
Right. And this is like one of the other things that like Elfi was like, oh, the Romanians work the hardest out of all the countries, in the whole entire world, this world. And it's like, oh, do you mean they didn't maybe work as smart as other countries who didn't do as many routines on hard surfaces? Like, that's another way to interpret that they're the hardest workers because they did the most. Maybe that's not wise. Or maybe other people are protecting their athletes so they can, live to be a gymnast of 28 who wins an Olympic gold medal on beam. Just saying.
Okay, other banned words. Supple. Christine Still. I know you're British, but...
No.
It's a no. Supple is a no. Every time Nastia did a routine, she was a supple little gymnast. And it was like, that is gross. You are one of the better ones, Christine, but like, supple. Swing some pipe, Tim. Doesn't mean what you think it means. That is a joke. And you say it, sometimes you say it on television.
I love it. Always say that, Tim.
Basically ancient in gymnastics terms. Shannon, 18, and ancient. That's a direct quote about Shannon Miller.
That will immediately, like, this is the other thing that I want to implement is the automatic slappinator. So basically they put it in front of the commentators, and if you call a gymnast ancient or old, it instantly slaps you. And it's really loud so that if you just don't have your camera on them, you can see them. But it's also hard enough so that when you come back to seeing the commentators, you can see a big, like, red mark on their cheek.
We've moved from here are all the things you shouldn't do to promote an abusive environment to absolutely physically abuse people. That's the path this podcast has taken.
But only if you weren't a gymnast. If you're a gymnast, you did, like, the slappinator's not allowed to touch you.
Okay.
It's really just for Al Trautwig.
So obviously tumbles on the beam like it's the floor. Gone. Because counterpoint, no, she doesn't.
No.
There. She just doesn't. No one ever has. And she doesn't. Beam is only 4 inches wide. Kid at a playground. International look.
International slappinator applies, though.
International look applies to
everyone.
Slappinator. The easiest skill in her whole routine. When someone falls on something that is like, I don't know, a full turn or something. Easy skill in her whole routine. It wasn't.
No.
The skill where she just got up on the beam instead of doing a real mount, that was the easiest skill in her routine.
Walking on the beam, taking a choreographed step is the easiest skill in her routine.
I don't know where they's finding these deductions, even when you do. Let's get rid of that. Don't pretend to have less information than you do. Your whole point here is to have expertise. Do I have others? I think those are mine.
No, I think yours. Mine are the words and phrases that are banned. Puberty.
Yeah, I mean, that's for me just in life. I don't want to hear anyone use the word. It is a gross word. It's in the category of supple. It is gross. Also, my 5th grade teacher pronounced it puberty. And I just need to talk about that for a second for no reason, but it's scarring.
Puberty. Wait.
Yeah.
No. Unless you're talking about like a phone booth that fell on top of someone and how much that weighed. Don't, in case someone was changing into their superhero outfit and there was an accident. Don't. The name of people's coaches, just in general, we don't need to know that. Why are you constantly bringing them up?
Unless you are always mad when they say the name of the male coach and not the name of the female coach.
That's true. So I should change that too. That should go on my do's and don'ts, because it should be, if you're going to give credit to the coach, you have to give credit tangentially to all their coaches. So if someone has a coach for each event, like many of the Russian gymnasts do, they should all be named.
I mean, very few of the U.S. gymnasts are really just working with one coach.
Yeah, they mostly have two. I would say two at a minimum. You have two coaches, but it should be like name the choreographer, name their tumbling coach, name their bars coach, name their vault coach, name all of them. And especially if it's a married couple, you better start with the women and then you can mention the man, because you have a lot of years of patriarchal nonsense to crush and fix. So, okay. Not for etiquette, not for ladies first, open the door first, to crush the patriarchy and make up for time lost. Okay. Also, insert the name of any head coach, head of a federation. That's who she's trying to impress. How do you know? How do you know she's not, unless she told you that? I don't care about how I do. I only care about what that person thinks to put me on the team. Unless she told you that or he told you that, don't say, but this never happens. Like this rare, I wouldn't say never. It rarely happens with the men. Unless they said that, how do you know that he or she isn't thinking, my goal here is just to feel good about how I do and know that I hit my routines the way I'm capable of, because that's all I can control. So that is all I'm concentrating on. I can't control the result. So the way I focus is this. Don't ascribe that nonsense. She's constantly looking over her shoulder at Bella to see if Bella's watching her.
Also, let's get rid of the watchful eyes of.
Yes.
It was never, Marta Caroli was not a person. She was just disembodied eyes. And it was always, and the watchful eyes of Marta Caroli. Her eyes were watchful, which means they were full of watch.
The word feminine.
Get rid of it.
It has no place in sports, period.
Or anything.
End of story.
No,
or anything. Yes, exactly.
Unless
it's even feminine products now. It doesn't have a place there either. It could be a uterus product, but it shouldn't be a feminine product. It should be named the actual organ.
Why do you think it's not a butch product?
Exactly.
Don't butch lesbians have to use tampons?
Yes. That's why it should just be a product for your uterus. Womanly? Nope. Also, no place in sports. Her figure. Slapometer. Slapogram. What did I call it? I don't know. Whatever that thing. The instant slapper. Slapogram is when you mess up on Instagram or TikTok and it reaches out and slaps you in the face. So in conclusion, I would like to say the following things. Number one, I want to play this very important TikTok message from Anastasia Arinsky on the TikToks. This is what you should play for yourself, man or woman, female, or however you identify as a they, before you do commentary.
Smash the patriarchy one day at a time for women everywhere and future women who are children right now but will be women later. Burn, motherfucker, burn like the witches before us. We are the daughters of the witches you couldn't burn. Shatter that glass ceiling, bitch. Love is love is love is love. One nation under God who is a woman. Sorry, not sorry. What do we always say?
Yeah. So that's the important message that I want every commentator and everyone to take away with them. And if you would like to make that message into your morning affirmation that goes off when your alarm rings each morning, like I have, then, I added some things to it, but I will put a link to that TikTok and you guys can, and if ideally we will all embody this message. So in conclusion, besides that message, which is Spencer's favorite thing that I've ever done on the podcast, be more like Kathy Johnson and Olly Hogben. Memorize this list. If you're going to do commentary, print it out, put it on your wall. There'll be a quiz. Stay on top of social change and science and
things we don't say anymore and shouldn't have ever.
Right. You need to be an anti-racist. Just not being racist is not enough. You have to work against it, combat stereotypes and homophobia and sexism, and smash the patriarchy. These are the important parts of your job, especially if you are a white man in this world doing commentary. Yeah, there's so much more we could get into. I mean, this could be chapter 1 of bad commentary, and then we could do a whole one on sexism, a whole one on creepy dudes, a whole one on
creepy dudes.
Racism. Yes. So, are any final words that you want to add?
Almost never.
Okay.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. It was so fun to listen back to that. But there were some parts that I was like, let's give an update on that. So since this episode first aired, U.S. Olympic coach John Geddert died when, instead of being arrested, the kindly local Michigan law enforcement decided it was fine to let him turn himself in for arraignment. Because you know how human traffickers are allowed to turn themselves in? It's totally normal. So instead of being arrested, he ended any chance of facing real justice for the 24 crimes he was charged with, including human trafficking and criminal sexual conduct, by taking his own life. More information in the show notes. The second update I have for you, and trigger warning about sexual abuse, is about English commentator and gymnast Monica Phelps. So my compassion for her as a body image terrorist who has internalized all that self-hate has evaporated since learning more about her and her husband. Little did I know how very, very on track we were with our disgust about her in this episode. So Monica Phelps, born Monica Rutherford, is married to, still, registered sex offender and diving Olympian Brian Phelps. Monica and her husband, Brian, founded the Olga Club in England, where her husband allegedly raped children for years and years. According to a Guardian article, see the show notes to read this, he is a convicted pedophile and, like many, hid in plain sight, coaching gymnastics despite accusations that no one took seriously. Sound familiar? Yeah. Oh my God, it's everywhere. It's like people can rise to power despite being even convicted. He was accused years before many of his final victims were even born. In 2008, he was accused of rape and pleaded guilty to indecency charges and sentenced to 9 years, of which he served 6. His wife, Monica Phelps, has stayed married to him through all of this. Stayed married to a man she founded a club with where he allegedly abused and raped children inside the club. According to police reports obtained by The Guardian, according to the report, Phelps also told detectives, quote, "The girls never said no or stop." So, that's who Monica Phelps is. Those are all my updates. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And we are back this Friday for Behind the Scenes at noon Pacific, taking your questions live, taking your questions you've written in with. And we can all discuss the state of the world or not as a family. And don't forget to get your tickets for the live show in Portland on December 9th at 6:30. Tickets are on sale now at gymcastic.com. And remember, you don't have to be there in person. You can get a virtual ticket and interact live the day of, or you can watch it after the event as well. Thank you all so much for your support. I hope you have a wonderful week. And remember to take off on gay, split on rights, especially rights, split hard on rights. And we will see you on Friday for Behind the Scenes.